Building complex things really doesn't need to be so bad. I think I've heard so many people say, but what we're building is so complex. And it drives me crazy because I'm like, if you just follow a few simple rules, building complex things does not need to be complicated. There's a difference between complex and complicated. And I think that many times people try to attach those two together always. I've seen some very complex systems that were easy to use, and I've seen some very simple systems that were extremely complicated, right? So it's one of those things where you need to understand both aspects or else it just doesn't line up. So there's only a few things, a few simple building blocks, if you will, that you can use to master complex systems and make them easier. And I think the fundamental piece has to do with the customer. And that means you need to understand that the customer is the fundamental rule for product management. If the customer doesn't need it or won't buy it, you shouldn't be building it, right? It's that simple. And when you finally break it down and understand that the product isn't about you or your organization, that the product is about the customer, then you put yourself in a position where you're either creating what they want to buy or convincing them to buy what you make, which is like what the iPhone did. And I think that once you gain the customer's confidence and trust, the level of confidence and trust that you have is directly proportional to the way or the effort that they're going to go through to understand your product and to buy your product. So I think that you need to hook the customer in and really make a difference. The second building block has to do with communications. So sometimes when you're trying to communicate, you need to be the first to listen and the last to speak. I always tell the story of Nelson Mandela and his grandson at the Travel Council, where he didn't say anything and he made sure he was last to speak. And while his grandson was upset, Nelson Mandela told him, it's better for me to wait and let everyone else speak. That way everyone doesn't just do what I say. I get to hear everyone's opinion and make sure that my idea was actually the best idea. I thought that was kind of good, right? And then the rules for efficient communication, those are simple. Never tell everything that you know, and tell them everything that they need to make a good choice. So if you're trying to communicate with someone, don't try to just say everything. Let's do it for this reason, that reason, this reason. If you're doing that, you're going to be in a heap of trouble. But if you go in and you just say, here are the things that I feel are key for you to understand. Here are the most important things for you. I think you're going to win a lot more flies with honey, right? I know it's a terrible example, but you need to make sure that you're communicating differently, efficiently, and effectively. You want to make sure that you are not repeating yourself or saying things just for the sake of filling time or filling space, right? Especially not in a podcast episode. All right. Let's go to planning. That's the next block. So no plan survives contact with the enemy, right? It's one of those things where once you plan, you can plan to adjust or plan to fail. I hear people say it all the time. And it's not that planning always breeds failure, but it's just if you come in with the attitude that I know it's not going to be perfect and I'm ready to pivot, it's going to have you better prepared for what happens when there's variance. So you have to be able to accept that sometimes things that you are asked to do or you were planning to do are going to be harder than you thought. Or sometimes there are more steps in actually doing a simple thing than we thought. And that's where I was going before, right? So something can be very simple, but just very, complex in a way the system has to operate. But it doesn't mean it's not a simple product or a simple thing. It just means that there's a lot of steps, right? So that's another idea. All right, let's talk about the product itself. So if you know what you're trying to make, you'll eventually get there. So, if I know my goal is to make pasta, I realize there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I'm going to get to the point eventually where I have pasta. And then just because I know how to make pasta doesn't mean I know how to make good pasta either. So it's one of those things where you really need to know what the pasta is and how you're going to get there, right? Interesting, right? But the truth is, if you never know what problem you're trying to solve or why people need a pasta to begin with, then you're done. You might as well not even continue at that point. You need to make your product sweet and simple. Well, not sweet pasta, but simple. And easy to integrate, easy to test, and easy to deploy. So that people want to use your product every single time. And they don't even consider, your competitor's product's not even a thought in their mind, right? You want to make sure you get that out of their mind. If you're building something technology, you want to consider architecture. So it's easy to make something super complicated, right? I'm going to say that again. It's easy to make something super complicated. You should be investing in simplicity, and how your simplicity of your product stands out as a key differentiator between what you've made and what other people have made. It sounds silly, but oftentimes when I'm doing things with like ChatGPT, for example, I always tell Chat to give this to me at a fifth grade reading level or sixth grade reading level. And it's not because I don't understand it, it's because I want to make sure everybody else does. So I don't want to call it the least common denominator, but you want to build things so that individual customers feel like they have the best possible outlet to get the answer that they need. Of course, you want to focus on the process as well. So, I don't know who said this quote, but I remember hearing it a few times at an Agile conference. A fool with a tool is still a fool. A fool with a powerful tool is a powerful fool. I'll read that one more time just because I wrote it down and I thought it was hysterical. Here we go. So a fool with a tool is still a fool, but a fool with a powerful tool is a powerful fool. So it's one of those things where if you know, you know. And then I hear people all the time saying, oh, Agile's dead. When it comes to process, Agile was never alive. It was a framework that you used to craft the best approach. And, it's just one of those things where you can't come in with the alive and breathing or dead analogies. It doesn't fit. And then finally, this was another quote that I heard. I want to say it was Jeff Sutherland who said this one because I thought it was so funny. He said, Agile is a terrible approach for building software. He says, all other approaches are much worse. I thought that was kind of fun because, it's not that what he has is the best. It's just there's a lot of worse ways to do things, right? And then last but not least, we want to make sure that we address risk. So no risk is ever mitigated or solved by ignoring it. You got to figure it out. And when you're considering it, you need to figure out the likelihood of how often it occurs and the consequence, what happens if it does occur. And that's going to help you align your risk and put it in a quadrant and address your risk accordingly. So I think these rules are going to help you really engage and understand that if you're trying to build complex things, it doesn't mean they have to be complicated. So you need to use this as your guide, figure out where you are, identify the gaps, and then fill in those gaps. And I promise if you do, your Agile implementation is just going to be that much better. That's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, learn more at agiledad.com. We would love to hear from you. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.